Welcome to me, where suspenseful, thrilling, and mysterious stories will draw you into a world where the lines between reality and fantasy seem to blur. When the night falls, when all the sounds gradually quiet down, leaving only your own heartbeat and breathing, that's when these stories begin. Tensions, unsolved mysteries, moments that will make you hold your breath in fear or curiosity, all are waiting for you ahead. Find a comfortable seat, dim the lights, and let this sound guide you on a journey that is not for the faint of heart. I want each of you to leave a comment sharing where you are in the world. And if you are enjoying the episodes, don't forget to give a like and subscribe to the channel now. Relax. Are you ready? If so, join me in the first story right now. High Hopes in the Rain. Sitting in a chair in the living room, Dave wonders, I know that I have to do something drastic, or nothing will change in our relationship. But what can that be? I was foolish and selfish. I am aware of that now. How do I undo it? He walks to the window and looks out, as if the act would give him an answer. As he scans the surroundings, he sees that it is raining. It is what his grandfather would have called a doozy of a storm. Then he gets an idea. He decides to follow it through, though it might just be foolish to the max. But he feels that it has to be tried. It is desperation time. He goes into the bedroom and puts on what is well known to friends and family to be his favorite sweater, blue with a big maple leaf on the front. Then he goes outside, getting soaked in mere seconds. He thinks once more about the foolish thing that he did slightly more than a week ago. At the very least, this will be yet another punishment, one that he is imposing on himself, one that he feels he deserves. But his hope is that it will change the failing state of his marriage, the event that harmed his marriage. It was a Saturday night, and as usual for this time of year, he was watching a hockey game in which his beloved Toronto Maple Leafs were playing. It was the third period, and the game was tied 3-3. The Leafs had been behind, but had made a comeback to tie the game. Their opposition, the New York Rangers, had just received a tripping penalty. The phone rang, and he wondered whether or not to answer it. But he could still watch the game while listening on his phone. It was his wife, Eva. She had been out to watch a movie with her best friends. They lived on the other side of town, so they were taking a bus to go back home. For her, there was an hour-long walk. There was no bus that would take her home. She did not feel like walking, as it had been a long day for her, and there were some thick clouds approaching where she was standing. She asked Dave to pick her up at the theater so that she would not have to walk home. His reply was definitely not what she wanted to hear. He told her that he was watching the Leaf game, and it was tied in the third period, with the Rangers just getting a penalty. He could not possibly abandon the game at this stage. She was stunned by his response and ended the call on the phone. She did so with anger and energy, banging her phone on her upper leg. Both of them knew that there was no bus that went near to their home. When she went to call a taxi cab, she discovered that her phone was no longer working. She would have to walk. And as she did, the expected rainfall began. Very heavy it was. By the time she reached home, she was completely drenched and very, very angry with her husband. Her first words to him when she finally arrived at their home was, "I think that you prefer your beloved Leafs to me. I hope that they lost." He was going to say that they won 4-3, something that he had jumped up and cheered about at the time, but was astute enough not to do so. When he looked at her drenched person and angry face, he knew that he was in deep trouble. The next day, which was Sunday, they barely spoke to each other. And when dinner time rolled around, and he asked her whether they might go out to have dinner in a local place that they both liked, her only reply was, "I guess there was no Leafs game tonight, or you would not have asked me. I'm making my own dinner tonight, and you can make your own damn dinner." Over the next few days, there was little said between them, other than the bare necessities, barked out in very short sentences. This is what had led him to the desperate gesture of going out in the rain while wearing his maple leaf sweater. He knew that she would soon to be in the living room as her favorite television show was on. The television had its back to the window, through which the front yard could be seen. She came into the room and turned on the television. Dave felt that she would eventually be seeing him and his soaking wet treasure. A few minutes passed by, and she did not appear to see him, so he walked towards the window until he was only a step away. He wanted to knock on the window, but decided against it. After about 10 minutes, she stood up. He reckoned that there was a commercial on, and that she was going to the kitchen to get something to eat or drink. He had heated up a frozen pizza for his own supper, and had eaten it alone, as he had done every night since the Saturday of her drenching. When she returned to the living room, a glass of wine in her hand, she suddenly saw him, wet sweater and all. She put the glass down and walked towards the window. Knowing him well after 5 years of marriage, she recognized one of his symbolic gestures. The fact that he had worn his leaf sweater while out in the rain had meaning that she clearly understood. She went quickly to the front door, opened it, and in a friendlier manner than she had used in speaking to him in days, she shouted out to him, "Come in right now, you moron," an affectionate term shared between them. When he came inside, she said to him, "I would hug you, you moron, but I don't want to get wet. Take the sweater off so I can put it in the dryer, and put something dry on." He stripped off the soaking garment and handed it to her. She grabbed it and took it downstairs to the dryer. He stood there, half naked, with a big smile on his face. When she returned to the living room, she returned his smile with a smile of her own. He then said, "I was selfish on Saturday. I am so sorry about that. You are way more important to me than a hockey team could ever be. You are in first place. They are a distant second." This was followed by a mutually engaging hug. The above story ends, but the suspense and thrill have never stopped. Right here is another equally interesting story. Please continue listening. Where Pirates Came to Die. A breath of wind slithered through the ruins and tumbled across his weathered face as he pressed the shard of limestone down the dry ashlar wall, leaving a new etched tally mark. It was a dimly lit chamber inside what was once the world's most notorious pirate prison. For him, it was a sanctuary, a place of refuge. Once the web developer for Shackleford Inc., in a city of skyscrapers, eclectic culture, and ultra-modern technology, Tom Malone scanned his Neanderthal calendar. 240 tallies made up the wall. Some were circled, and only he knew why. Gone were the titles of husband, employee, and neighbor. Given his isolated surroundings, the term castaway was more appropriate. A life filled with country club galas, company retreats, and exotic travel was lost. Survival had replaced living. Tom buttoned his slightly torn flannel shirt and grabbed his coat. He exited the chamber where the wrought iron door, rusted and bent, hung by a single hinge. He moved down the main corridor and stepped through a hollowed-out gap in the outer wall. The Rook, as it was called, was made up of 3 layers, undoubtedly to make escape near impossible for even the smartest buccaneer. If the legends were true, the Rook had seen the likes of Edward Davis and even Black Anthony zipping his coat. He trudged down the path to the beach. This was his routine every day. 2 laps around the island. The overcast sky produced a gloomy horizon, but that was normal for this time of year, or so he assumed. If the tallies were correct, it should be October. The sea was a gray mass of rippling currents. Tom breathed profoundly, absorbing the salty fragrance. The flow of the ambient tide took him back to simpler times when walking on a beach meant hunting for shark teeth, metal detecting for forgotten coins and jewelry, and collecting seashells that made their way into the guest bathroom. Such days seemed as far out of reach as the horizon. Suddenly, he spotted tracks. They snaked from the north before turning about just outside the Rook's outer wall. He recognized the tread patterns as those of a Jeep Wrangler. Tom followed, occasionally glancing over his shoulder. When he reached the familiar bend on the beach, he heard the blast of a horn and dove behind a line of palm trees. Peering through the trunks, he noticed a docked ferry on the beach. A jeep was climbing the ramp onto the ferry. Personnel in neon-colored jackets moved about the deck. Another search party, he thought. A mustached man in uniform, wearing the same jacket, examined an area in the sand. He spoke into his radio before moving further inland. Tom's heart leapt into his throat when he caught sight of the woman following behind. She wore a yellow raincoat, and her arms were folded tightly as the sea breezes pushed ashore. Her curls flailed and whipped, no matter what direction she faced. She said something to her uniformed companion and advanced toward the tree line. "No," Tom muttered, before slipping back from the bend. He tried to quicken his pace, but the dry sand absorbed every step. Once back in the chamber, he dropped to the floor and focused on slowing his breathing. The acoustics had almost given him away during the initial search months earlier. His heart drummed, and his temporal pulse thumped. He caught his face in the mirror, fragment by the tally wall. It had belonged to the mirror in the cabin cruiser's bathroom before Tom dismantled the $1 million yacht upon his arrival. He gazed at the worn face and graying beard. Then there was the scar, where scalding grease once landed. "Tom!" came the woman's voice. He pressed against the chamber wall like a spy dodging a spotlight. "Mrs. Malone, we've searched the ruins before with no luck." He assumed this was the uniformed man. Tom felt his way down the chamber wall and gripped a loose stone. After a few careful tugs, it came out of its place. He reached into the cavity and pulled out the dust-covered Glock. "Tom!" Squeezing the seasoned grip, he inhaled deeply, closed his eyes, and exhaled. His mind traveled to the frost-covered day after his father was buried. Tom opened the gun cabinet and retrieved the pistol his father taught him to shoot with. "This will be yours someday," he would say at the range. Tom choked back the mist that wanted to erupt from his eyes. None of it matters now. Too much has happened. He took another lungful before pursing his lips and blowing out. He eyed the tallied wall and totaled the circled marks. 16. He suspected as much, but now he knew. One bullet remained. "We need to call off the search," he called out, his voice nearer than before. That meant she was too. "No, he's here. I know it," came her distraught and shaking voice. Tom pressed harder to the wall. He hoped the ancient stone could absorb him and conceal any trace of a man desperate to remain in the shadows. "Ma'am, the weather is slowing us down, and the city cannot afford a stranded ferry with personnel on board. Would you stop if it was not if it meant putting others in danger?" He ran his free hand over the scar. He traced the tight line of skin that ran from beneath his eye to the corner of his mouth. The sting had subsided long ago, but the hurt ran deep. "Please," she pleaded, "just let me look in here." The man radioed the ferry that he was making a final sweep of the old ruins, and that preparations for departure should begin immediately. For a moment, all was still. "Tom!" came the frantic echo. He slid his finger over the cold trigger. "Never again will you scar me, Maria," he whispered. A single shot rang from the remnants of a place where pirates came to die. Let's continue with the next no less thrilling stories. Storm of Duality. Not again. Not so soon. Margaret's whisper carried over the silence of the house. With a fierce grip, she bit her remaining fingernail, tearing a piece off and causing the skin to bleed. Margaret stood at the window as the sky brooded, thick with the weight of an impending storm. Dark clouds churned in slow agony, twisting and folding over themselves as if writhing in torment. This storm, she knew, would continue for days. Long, agonizing days. A sharp gust of wind rattled the glass, and she flinched. The leaves outside skittered like restless spirits, whispering secrets she didn't want to hear. The first patter of rain kissed the roof, soft, almost deceivingly gentle. She, however, saw through the deception. Soon, the downpour would come. The sky would open, and the world would drown in its sorrow. She pressed a trembling hand to her forehead. It was happening again. The slow, creeping descent. The shift within herself that she feared most. Margaret felt strangely linked to the storm. A tether that bound her to its fury, its anguish. As the clouds thickened and the thunder rumbled low in the distance, something inside her twisted. The familiar chasm in her mind yawned open, and she felt herself slipping into it. Her childhood marked her first awareness of this connection. A violent thunderstorm had raged outside, and she had found herself gripped with a restless, frantic energy. It was as though the storm had crawled inside her and filled her veins with its electric charge. Her mother had found her hours later, curled in a corner, whispering to herself. "It's not me," she had murmured over and over. "It's not me." Adulthood brought no change to that feeling. The storm, the darkness, the shifting inside her. Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde. That's how it felt. Two selves coexisting in fragile balance until the storm tipped the scale. A peal of thunder cracked across the sky, and she clenched her hands into fists. The rain was coming harder now, sheets of it hammering against the house with merciless force. The wind howled, shaking the trees, their skeletal branches clawing at the sky. As she moved from the window, the walls felt like they were closing in, the shadows distorting her sense of reality. She reached for the kettle with unsteady hands, trying to focus on something tangible, something real. But her fingers fumbled, and the kettle clattered to the floor With a deafening crash, Margaret gawped, stumbling back and slamming into the counter. The impact sent a jolt through her body, but it was nothing compared to the dread twisting inside her. The storm's grip extended beyond the world outside. It clawed at her very mind, unraveling her sanity, thread by thread. She could feel herself fracturing, her thoughts splintering under the immense pressure, as if something dark and insidious lurked just beneath the surface, waiting for the perfect moment to take control. The whispering started then, not from outside, not from the wind, but from within her own head. Just surrender. It will be easier. She squeezed her eyes shut, rocking her head. No, why fight it? You know this is who you are. She pressed her hands to her temples. Her breathing was increasing, like the thunder and lightning. Her ears were buzzing, overpowering the storm itself. Margaret sensed her body was detaching from itself, like her reality was crumbling to the floor. It was the storm inside her, the darkness waiting to consume her. Another crack of thunder split the sky, and a bolt of lightning illuminated the house in a stark, white flash. Margaret reconnected with her body again and felt the surge through her veins, like she poked a fork in a light socket. She glimpsed at herself in the kettle's reflection. Her dilated eyes, the size of marbles, and her pale, almost unrecognizable face stared back at her. Then she realized the storm had taken her. She staggered backward, her hands clutching at the edge of the counter. She needed to hold on, to ground herself. She didn't want to become that person. Darkness prompted unthinkable actions. It whispered to her, feeding her fears, twisting her thoughts until right and wrong blurred together. It promised relief, power, an escape from the suffocating weight of reality. But she knew the cost. She had seen it before, felt it claw at her mind, urging her to surrender. Her fingers gripped the counter tighter, nails biting into the surface. She had to resist. She fought despite the overwhelming urge to give up. Letting go felt incredibly tempting. To release pent-up emotion, to embody the storm's will. She could feel the power coiling in her chest, raw and untamed. Another roar of thunder, another crash of rain. The wind shrieked, rattling the windows as she thought they might shatter. Margaret let out a strangled sob. Please, stop. But storms don't listen. Their anger is unrestrained, and they destroy. Tears burned fiery trails down her cheeks. She staggered forward, pressing her forehead to the cool glass of the window. The rain distorted the world outside, turning everything into an indistinct blur. Just like her mind, she had to hold on. She had to be strong and fight. With a trembling breath, she forced herself to move, to step away from the window. She grabbed the kettle from the floor and set it back on the stove, the simple motion anchoring her. She filled it with water, her fingers still shaking, but moving with purpose. The dizziness was overpowering her, while vibrations pulsate at her temples, and brief electrical shakes interrupted her thought process. She would endure the storm, both outside and within. But what awaited on the other side? Would she emerge unscathed? Or would the tempest leave its mark, reshaping her in ways she could never undo? Having put the kettle back on the counter, Margaret closed her eyes and breathed deeply. She made her way to the special place, the soundproof area, with images of forests, waterfalls, and seascape. She made sure it was stocked with water, nuts, and protein bars. This served as her refuge, untouched by inner or outer turmoil. Here, seemingly serene, she escaped chaos. Briefly rediscovering herself, Margaret cast a final glance at the furious storm, its howls clawing at the windows like a desperate specter. As she forced the door shut, the latch clicked into place, a thin barrier between her and the chaos beyond. Yet, just before the silence settled, the storm's final utterance slithered through the cracks, a venomous whisper threading into her mind. "You can never escape me. I'll always be with you." A tremor ran down her spine, but she clenched her fists, grounding herself. The storm could rage, it could scream, but she refused to let it claim her. Not tonight, and for tonight, that was enough. Stormy night. Eli Carter stood in the middle of Elm Street, rain pouring down like God's own wrath, drenching him to the bone. The water hit the pavement so hard it bounced, a million tiny suicides leaping from the sky only to splatter and die. The street lights flickered, their weak yellow halos barely piercing the downpour. His shoes squelched with each step, and his breath came in tight little gasps. He didn't know how long he'd been standing there. Minutes, hours, a lifetime? He had no memory of how he got here. A second ago, or maybe an eternity. He had been in bed, tangled in sheets damp with sweat, the weight of a dream pressing down on him like a lead blanket, a dream of movement, of running. Endless hallways stretched before him, impossibly long, bending at angles that didn't make sense. The walls, lined with doors, slammed shut behind him, one by one, not by his doing, but by something unseen, something chasing, something that wanted him. Each door he passed felt like a choice he had already failed to make. Each slammed door, a lost opportunity. His breath had come in gasps. His legs ached from running. But the hallways never ended. Just turn after turn, door after door, the floor shifting beneath his feet, like the belly of a great beast. There were no windows, no light, except the sickly glow of something overhead that wasn't quite a bulb, wasn't quite fire. And in the air, thick as humidity in August, was the hum of something enormous, some deep, resonant sound felt more in his ribs than in his ears. And then, this, the dream had ruptured, torn apart like thin fabric. And he had been here, the rain, the street, no transition, no waking up. Just one reality swapped for another, seamlessly, cruelly. His mind struggled, clawing for logic where there was none. The downpour drummed against his skull, cold rivulets snaking down the back of his neck, washing away the last frayed edges of the dream. But had it even been a dream? Because the certainty struck him now, deep and final. A stone dropped into the well of his gut. Something was very, very wrong. A flicker of movement caught his eye. Across the street, just beyond the yawning black mouth of an alley, stood a man. He was tall and thin, dressed in a suit too old-fashioned to be modern, but too crisp to be antique. His face was long, almost horse-like, but his eyes were holes, not black pits, not deep shadows, holes, like someone had taken an ice cream scoop to his face and dug them clean out. Eli took a step back. The man took a step forward. A chuckle floated through the rain, thin and reedy, like laughter being played backward on an old cassette tape. Eli turned and ran. The city around him twisted as he moved, as if reality itself were coming undone, unraveling thread by thread. The buildings groaned, their bones creaking, their very foundations shifting beneath his frantic steps. They leaned in, warping like softened candle wax left too close to a flame, their brick faces drooping, sagging, watching. Windows blinked, slow, reptilian, sluggishly adjusting their focus. Black pupils contracting and expanding, as if deciding whether to acknowledge him or swallow him whole. The sidewalks rippled beneath him, no longer solid, but something uncertain, something alive. Each step sent out concentric rings through the puddles, distorting his reflection. His face melting, elongating, breaking apart into something unrecognizable. The street lamps flickered, their light stretching and warping, casting shadows where there should be none. Shadows that flickered and darted, mimicking his movements with a half-second delay, as if considering whether they should obey him or something else entirely. But he didn't stop. He couldn't stop. His feet pounded against the street, their rhythm desperate, breath hitching in his throat, like a song caught on a broken record. His lungs burned, his muscles screamed, but none of it mattered, because behind him gaining, closing the distance with something worse than footsteps, was him. No sound, no breathing, just presence, heavy, dense, a gravity that pressed against the nape of Eli's neck, thick as storm clouds rolling in, the air charged with something unspeakable. His skin prickled, his instincts screamed, "Don't look back, don't look back." But something deep inside him, something ancient and terrified, already knew if he turned to see what followed, it would be the last thing he ever saw. He rounded a corner and slammed into something solid. A wall? No. A person. A woman. She was small, bird-like, with a sharp face and sharper eyes. Her raincoat was red, vivid, almost glowing against the gray world around them. She grabbed Eli by the shoulders, her fingers biting into his flesh like talons. "You need to wake up," she hissed. "I am awake." She shook her head. Not yet. A roar split the air behind him. Not a human sound. Not even an animal sound. A sound made of nightmare and hunger, of places that existed only in the deepest recesses of the brain. The places humans had long since forgotten how to fear. Eli turned. The man was closer now, his mouth stretching into an impossible grin, jagged teeth protruding like broken piano keys. The woman yanked Eli to the side, dragging him toward the nearest door. It wasn't there a second ago, but it was there now. A rusted metal thing, standing in the middle of the sidewalk, freestanding, no walls to frame it. She shoved it open and pulled him through. Everything flipped, inside out, upside down. Eli hit the ground hard, the breath leaving his lungs in a rush. He rolled onto his back, staring at the ceiling of his bedroom. The rain was gone. The city was gone. The woman gone. He was lying in his own bed, tangled in sweat-drenched sheets, the room bathed in the cold glow of his alarm clock. 3:47 a.m. A dream. Just a dream. He sat up, rubbing his face. His hands were shaking, fingers twitching like dying spiders. His throat was dry, a desert of cotton and dust. He needed water, something real, something solid to anchor himself. The lingering weight of the dream, or whatever it had been, clung to him like a second skin, sticky, suffocating. He swung his legs over the side of the bed and froze. His feet were wet, not damp, not dewy with sweat. Wet, like he had waded through a flooded street, like he had stepped barefoot into the mouth of a storm. His pajama pants clung to his calves, the fabric sodden and heavy, waterlogged with something that smelled faintly of earth and rot. The cold bled into his bones. Then he saw it. a tiny river of water, glistening in the dim glow of his bedside clock, winding its way across the floor like a snake slithering home. It led to the bedroom door. No, not just to the door. Through it. And there, stark against the pale wood, were muddy footprints. His footprints, Eli's breath hitched. His ribs felt too tight, his heart slamming against them like a frantic bird trapped in a cage. He reached out with a trembling hand and touched the sheets, sopping wet. The scent of rain clung to them, sharp and electric. The metallic tang of a storm that had no place inside his room. A storm that should not have followed him here. The air shifted behind him. The closet door creaked. The sound slow and deliberate, like a sigh from something old and waiting. The shadows inside it gaped, thick and hungry, and then, oh God, then from the darkness came a chuckle, thin, reedy, a sound that knew him. The drought. Summer died 50 years ago, and autumn never came. The sky was a hard shell of endless blue, unbroken by clouds, as if God had dipped his paintbrush in cobalt and forgotten to rinse it out. Heat waves shimmered off the asphalt like restless ghosts, and the air tasted faintly of burnt rubber and dust. The stale breath of a town stuck in time. Cedar Ridge had always been small, a thumbprint on the back roads of nowhere. There were farms, of course, though most had dried up and blown away with the last real rain. What remained were brittle corn stalks, blackened and skeletal, standing in neat rows like mourners at a graveside. The few farmers left mumbled about drought-resistant crops, but spoke of miracles with the same dry hopelessness they reserved for paying taxes. Rust scabs bloomed on the water towers, and the gas station on Main Street had stopped carrying windshield wiper fluid years ago. No need for it when the sky never wept. They still sold beer, though, and on days when the heat pressed down like a fist, the townsfolk gathered in the shade of the Sinclair station's green dinosaur sign, cold cans sweating in their hands. It was there, leaning against the faded scales of that prehistoric beast, that Tom Weaver saw the stranger for the first time. The man came walking up the road from the south, where the horizon quivered like molten glass. He wore black, a suit crisp as a knife edge, and carried a battered leather suitcase in one hand. A wide-brimmed hat shaded his face, but there was something unsettling about him, even from a distance. He didn't stumble or waver in the heat the way normal men did. His stride was steady, purposeful, as if he carried winter in his pocket. "Ain't seen a salesman in years," muttered Earl Granger, wiping sweat from his forehead with a grease-streaked rag. What the hell's he selling? Coffins? The men chuckled, low and uneasy. But Tom's beer went sour on his tongue. Something about the stranger's silhouette made his skin crawl. The sharp angles, the way shadows clung to him like cobwebs, even in the brutal sunlight. The man in black reached the edge of the group and tipped his hat politely. His eyes were a pale, icy blue, startling against the deep tan of his weathered face. He looked like someone who'd walked a long way and hadn't found what he was looking for. "Gentlemen," he said, his voice smooth as polished stone. "Mighty warm today, isn't it?" Earl snorted. "Been warm every damn day since Truman was president. What's it to you?" The stranger's smile didn't reach his eyes. "Oh, I'm just passing through. Thought maybe you fine folks could help me with a little business matter." Tom narrowed his eyes. "What kind of business?" The man set his suitcase down with a soft thud. The latches gleamed like silver teeth as he flicked them open. Inside, nestled against dark velvet, were rows of gleaming vials filled with liquid that shimmered like captured moonlight. "I sell weather," the man said simply. There was a beat of stunned silence, followed by a bark of laughter from Earl. "Weather? You gotta be kidding me. What's next? Bottled air?" The stranger didn't flinch. "Rain, snow, a cool breeze on a summer's day. I've got it all. Guaranteed to work or your money back." Tom stepped closer, curiosity prickling beneath his unease. He peered into the case, mesmerized by the swirling colors. One vial shimmered with iridescent blues and silvers, like the reflection of moonlight on water. Another glowed a fierce, fiery red. "How much?" Tom asked before he could stop himself. The stranger's lips curved into that unsettling smile again. "For you, sir? A bargain. One memory, freely given." Tom blinked. "A memory? Just a little thing," the man assured him. "Something you won't miss. In exchange, I'll give you enough rain to fill your fields for a season." Earl spat on the ground. "This is bullshit. Come on, Tommy, let's get out of here." But Tom's heart was pounding. He thought of his farm, the cracked earth, the dying crops. Thought of his wife, Ellie, who hadn't smiled in months because she knew what was coming. The bank foreclosure, the auction, the slow death of everything they'd built together. "What kind of memory?" Tom asked hoarsely. The stranger's eyes gleamed. "Oh, just a small one. Perhaps the taste of your first kiss, the sound of your mother's laughter. Nothing important." Tom hesitated, then nodded. "Deal." The man in black extended a gloved hand, and Tom shook it. The air shimmered between them, and for a moment, Tom felt a strange, dizzying tug deep in his chest, like something had been gently plucked from inside him. When it was over, the stranger handed him a vial filled with shimmering blue liquid. "Pour this over your fields tonight," he instructed. "And remember, the bargain is sealed." Tom barely heard him. His mind was already racing with visions of green fields and heavy rain. That night, under a sky still stubbornly cloudless, Tom stood at the edge of his withered fields. The brittle corn stalks rattled faintly in the dry breeze, a chorus of death. His hands trembled as he uncorked the vial, the shimmering blue liquid catching what little starlight there was. The scent hit him first, clean, sharp, like distant lightning and wet pavement after a storm. It was a smell he hadn't known in years. Taking a deep breath, Tom tilted the vial and let the liquid trickle out. It splattered onto the cracked, dust-hardened earth with a faint hiss, vanishing almost instantly into the thirsty ground. He watched, breath tight in his chest, waiting for something, anything, to happen. At first, there was only smoke, thick and suffocating. Then the earth shuddered beneath his feet, subtle as a heartbeat, but growing stronger. The low, primal growl of thunder rolled across the sky, distant yet powerful, like some ancient beast awakening from a long slumber. The wind shifted, cool and damp, carrying with it the promise of deliverance. A single drop splattered against Tom's forehead, cold and startling. He blinked, hardly daring to believe it. Another drop, then another, until the heavens opened with a sudden, furious roar. Rain came down in sheets, wild, relentless, drenching him in moments. The smell of wet earth rose around him, rich and intoxicating. Dust turned to mud beneath his boots as rivulets of water carved new paths through the parched ground. Tom threw back his head and laughed, a raw, unhinged sound torn from somewhere deep inside him. He spread his arms wide, welcoming the downpour like a sinner at baptism. Water slicked his hair to his scalp and dripped from his chin, but he didn't care. His laughter mingled with the storm, defiant and joyful. The fields drank greedily, the dead husks of corn softening, straightening, as though waking from a long nightmare. Leaves unfurled, vibrant green bleeding back into lifeless stalks. The transformation was swift and almost magical. A resurrection right before his eyes. By morning, the storm had passed, leaving the world washed clean and glistening under a pale new sun. Tom stood at the edge of his fields, now lush and vibrant, the corn standing tall and proud, shimmering with droplets of water. The air smelled sweet, alive. the screen door creaked, and Ellie came running out of the house, bare feet splashing through puddles. Her face was radiant with disbelief, tears mingling with the remnants of rain. "Tom? How?" she gasped, her voice breaking with wonder. He didn't answer. Words seemed pointless. Instead, he pulled her into his arms and kissed her, fierce and grateful, as if sealing a promise between them. For the first time in years, Cedar Ridge felt alive, and hope, long buried beneath drought and despair, bloomed anew. The stranger returned a week later. Tom saw him standing by the gas station, his black suit immaculate despite the mud that clung to everyone else's boots. He knew, deep down, that this was no coincidence. "What do you want?" Tom demanded, his voice rough. The man's smile was razor sharp. "Just checking in. How's the farm?" "It's fine. Better than fine. Glad to hear it." The stranger's eyes glittered. "But you see, Mr. Weaver, memories are tricky things. Sometimes they're connected in ways we don't expect." Tom frowned. "What are you talking about?" The man tilted his head. "Tell me, Tom, do you remember your wife's name?" Tom opened his mouth, then froze. A cold dread crept up his spine. He could see her face clearly, her bright eyes, the curve of her smile, but her name was gone, slipped through his fingers like water. "No," Tom whispered, horror dawning. "No, that's not possible." "Ah," the stranger said softly. "A shame. But as I said, a small thing. Nothing important." Tom lunged at him, but the man in black was already walking away, his silhouette dissolving into the shimmering heat. The rain never came again, and neither did Tom's wife. At least, not in any way that mattered. She was still there, smiling and talking. But her name was a hollow echo in Tom's mind, forever lost to the drought. And so Cedar Ridge, baked under the unchanging sun, its people haunted by what they'd forgotten. The above story has ended. Let's listen to the next story. In the alley. In the alley. You never know when or exactly where I, the destroyer, will strike. I respect no one, people, animals, houses, or possessions. Hear me roar as I approach. Dark clouds and sky announce my coming. Witness my violence. Trees fall, glass shatters, puny man-made cars flip over, roofs are ripped off, light poles are bent. There is no stopping me. A storm is coming, Mitzi. I can feel it in my old bones, Gladys Moore said to her cat that morning. Better turn on the news to see if the weather people know anything. Gladys had lived in Grand Island, Nebraska all her life. No stranger to storms, she knew what to do, and had ridden out several during her lifetime with only major yard cleanup. She wasn't that worried. She had a cellar, but she hadn't met an F5 yet. Mitzi vigorously licked her ears. Inside the canal, pressure was building. Far away in the distance, her sensitive hearing picked up a rumble of thunder. She raced around the kitchen, her fur standing on end and her tail puffed out. If her person knew what was good for her, she would slide underneath the bed soon. Well, that is, if she would fit. Rusty Booman heard the news. Same county, same general vicinity. "A twister is headed our way," Rusty yelled at his brother, Charlie. Clothes and shoes were jammed on. A camera was slung around Rusty's neck. The back screen door slammed. Charlie gunned the Chevy farm truck as dust and gravel flew up behind them on the road. Rusty switched the radio on and listened to the newscaster. "Turn toward Alda," he said to Charlie. Just then, his phone began flashing. "This is the emergency warning system. Prepare for tornado near Alda and Grand Island." Charlie peered up through the truck window at the sky, where greenish-gray clouds amassed. A stiff wind whistled through gaps in the insulation around the truck's doors. Suddenly, the gale held its breath. The eerie silence momentarily chilled the simmering excitement of the young men. Charlie pulled to the road's shoulder. "This is it, Russ. Get the camera ready. Our names will be all over TV when we get a close-up picture of the funnel coming down. They will say something like, 'Young storm chasers capture tornado touchdown,' and we'll be famous." They jumped out of the truck, and Rusty adjusted his camera's f-stops. Later, what was actually said was, "Young storm chasers killed near Alda." Their pickup truck lay in the ditch next to the road. Who knows what happened to the camera and the pictures? They were never found. "Foolish young men," says the destroyer. "But there is no law that says that people can't be idiots. They got a warning. Even looking at the signs in the sky should have told them I was imminent. No remorse on my part." As soon as Gladys saw the darkening expanse above her house, she put on her sturdy shoes and hung a whistle on a chain around her neck. She called her neighbor, Torrance Fielding. "You headed for shelter?" she asked. "Need anything?" "Yep, going down to keep the spiders in the basement company. Got everything I need. You?" "I'm fine. Just got to sit it out." Her tornado safety list was checked. Food, warm clothing and blankets, a flashlight, first aid kit, her meds, and water. She put Mitzi in her carrier with a soft cloth on the bottom. After several trips downstairs with supplies and her beloved cat, she closed the basement door behind her. A transistor radio would give her news. She put on her bicycle helmet, lest something hit her in the head, well away from the small windows. Gladys planted herself in a chair with Mitzi on her lap. Mitzi hated being confined and restless. She squirmed and meowed. Outside, the wind rose and shrieked and howled like a possessed animal. while they waited and waited. Fear shivered down Gladys's spine. Then a silent lull, somehow more frightening, like the storm was gathering strength for its next onslaught. The house began to shake. Hail rattled down outside like bullets. She covered her head and Mitzi with a blanket. Slam, bang. They could hear wood splintering, objects falling and crashing to the floor above them. Paint cans plunged from the basement shelves, and some ruptured, spattering the cement with color. A suffocating pressure bore down on Gladys's chest. Rising dust made her cough. Her heart pounded, and her breath came in gasps. Panicked, she yanked the covering off herself. Bright flashes of light could be seen through the shattered window panes as the tornado passed over them. Debris from outside whooshed in through the broken windows. Mitzi attempted to claw her way out of her prison, but Gladys held her fast. Had hours passed? Again, an ominous hush after the storm had passed over them. But Gladys sat still for minutes, squeezing the carrier against her shaking body. Mitzi let loose a yowl. "We're safe, sweetie." "We made it." Slowly, Gladys stood. Her shoes crunched over broken glass, blown clear across the floor. Avoiding the paint puddles, she grasped the handrail with one hand and climbed the stairs to the door leading back into her house. It would not open. She jiggled the handle. Nothing. She set Mitzi down on the stairs and pushed her weight against it. Wouldn't budge. No way could she crawl out those dinky basement windows. Anyway, she'd be cut to pieces. Wasn't there a hammer down here somewhere? Yep, it had fallen from its perch on the pegboard. My strength isn't what it used to be. These doors were made solid. Not such a great thing right now. She kept hammering without much result. Sweat rolled down her face. She should be glad she'd survived, but now being trapped was scary too. Mitzi wasn't helping. Her plaintive cries grated in Gladys's ears and made her more on edge. She set her weapon down and rubbed her forehead. To her surprise, her fingers came away bloody. When had she got injured? Now it hurt. But when she looked down, her eyes rested on her whistle. She blew with all her might, while Mitzi flattened her ears. Hours later, when Torrance was able to exit his own house, which had been flattened by the big oak in his yard, he hurried to Gladys and heard her now faint whistle. He shook his head in wonder. One wall with a door stood. Otherwise, her house was a pile of rubble. "I hear you, Gladys," he shouted. "I'm going to get you out." The destroyer laughed as he barreled down the countryside, wreaking devastation as he went. Even the people like Gladys, who planned ahead, aren't completely safe from me. I demolished her house. She's homeless now. But like others, she might rebuild. spawned by a thunderstorm, I'll gather strength again soon and plunder this same area. Crazy people. There's a reason why they call it Tornado Alley. Is that a train? With extreme speed, the wind brushed against my face, blew my hair into my eyes, and tangled it around my head and neck. I clawed at the long red strands as I watched clouds begin to swirl, moving into a large circular motion. 12 o'clock, noon, and the skies were as dark as night. The few clouds that showed up against the dark sky were as huge, grayish, white pillows running across the sky. The wind became swifter and colder in a matter of seconds. I ran towards the house for shelter as fast as my legs could carry me. Then the rain came. Large, hard drops that pelted my unprotected head with a fierceness I had never experienced. I slammed through the door, ran about the house, closing all the windows that were opened to beat the heat and humidity. The wind whistled through the walls of the old clapboard homestead with a vengeance. Down the 6 steep steps to the basement, I ran, spotted the old handheld radio, and quickly grabbed it. Rolling through the channels, there was nothing but static. I tore the back off to check for batteries. Empty. Stumbling across the bold orange, black, and yellow, striped outdoor carpet, I headed back up the stairs toward the kitchen. My anxious pull on the utility storage drawer was more aggressive than intended. It flew across the room, slammed against the opposite wall as its contents soared around the room. I located the batteries and began to move in that direction. Then, out went the lights. I had lived in that house my entire life, 35 years. But it was still difficult to find my way across the room on my hands and knees in the dark. Finally, I made it across the room. In the process, I rammed my head into the cabinet door. The batteries lay within reach. After slamming the batteries into the old radio, I ran back to the basement to find a flood. Water rising, now licked at the second step from the bottom. Suddenly, the rain stopped, and the wind stopped blowing. It was too quiet. I looked out the back door window. The sky, still black as night, made it hard to see what was going on in the sky above. I looked all around. Nothing but blackness. There was a deafening sound. I looked around to find the source, but it was too dark to see anything from my viewpoint. The leaves on the trees rustled, then fell to the ground. The noise was so intense, I thought I was hearing things. A low whistle, accompanied by a chuka, 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 mixed with a loud scream that grew into something painful. I covered my ears with my hands, unsure if the scream came from me or elsewhere. I ran from the house and across the street to my neighbor's yard and the safety of their basement home. As a child, both of my parents worked nights. They had instructed me, as well as my 3 siblings. If there is ever a chance of a tornado, run across the street to the Williams house. Their entire home is a basement and the safest place to be in a bad storm. We lived in the Midwest, where I still resided, and people had called our area Tornado Alley because the tornadoes almost always came right through our neighborhood. This caused destruction, with much expense for replacing things like roofs, sheds, cars, and trucks, and sometimes even livestock. As an adult, I still take my parents' instructions to heart and run to my neighbor's house when necessary. Alice opened the door and dragged me in. That's when I saw the source of the eerie sound. "Is that a train?" I asked Alice, my neighbor, even as the question sounded ludicrous to my ears. A train in the sky? That was impossible, wasn't it? "No, Opal dear. That's a funnel cloud," Alice answered. "A what?" I looked out the window after she shut the door behind me. "A tornado." She dragged me away from the door. "Come, we must hurry." She rushed us into the middle of the house, sat me on the floor next to a sofa placed against the wall, and covered us with a heavy blanket. The train was now overhead. I remember being in many tornadoes as a kid, but I don't remember hearing anything like the noise I heard then. I was more afraid during that storm than I had ever been before. After the train sounds left and the rain started coming down again, Alice went into the kitchen to make us some sweet hot cocoa with marshmallows. Alice was the daughter of the people that I had run too many years ago, and the cocoa recipe was one of her mom's. I would never have told my own mother this, but it was the best I had ever had. When we heard the all-clear sirens, we opened the door and looked out at the sun-shining afternoon. Alice's yard had no large trees for branches to break off of, or leaves to clutter her lawn. But the family always had a huge garden with potatoes, carrots, lettuce, tomatoes, and many other things like stalks of corn and assorted colors of peppers. Unfortunately for Alice, it looked like there was going to be a lot of canning going on at her house very soon. There were trees that grew to the side of their house along the roadside, but they were evergreens, stout and dense. I remember hiding behind them to block the wind as we waited for the school bus. There was an entire row of 6, and on frigid days, other kids would walk to the Williamses' yard just to use the tree block. Sometimes 7 or 8 of us, all huddled there together for warmth. The evergreens were planted there as protection from high winds and storms. It seemed to work. At least it worked that day. I looked across the road toward my house and noticed the roof would need some shingles replaced, something I had learned to do at an early age, since we lost them so many times. Most insurance companies want to charge a premium for living in that area now, due to recurring claims, but it's worth it most of the time. If it's only a few shingles, I normally wouldn't have bothered with the claims. I would just do the job and have done with it. That practice also kept my policy premiums down. When I got home, I toured the house looking for damage, which was aplenty. 2 broken windows. Our shed had blown over the fence into my next-door neighbor's yard, crumbled against one of their trees into a large metal ball. Other than the flooded basement, the rest of the house looked in surprisingly decent shape. The water in the basement would recede in time, and with the application of a little mold repellent, the standing water cleanup should be fairly easy. I now know what a tornado sounds like. I guess I've been lucky over the years. That was the only time I was that close to a tornado. I used to hear stories from folks in the area talking about seeing and hearing a tornado. Each tale was just a little different. Some said it was like an airplane coming in for a landing. Others said it was like a car crash with metal tearing and brakes squealing. I only ever heard one person say it sounded like a freight train. Wheels rolling over tracks, brakes squealing, and cars swaying from side to side as they took the curves. I can attest. That is the sound I believe a tornado to be like. A train. We think it's over, but in fact, it's just begun. The next story will thrill you in a completely different way. Paranoid delusions. The wind buffeted him wildly, and the rain hammered down relentlessly. He was walking near the local creek, which was connected to the suburb's storm water drains. But this particular area was just rocks, shrubs, trees, and water. Hastily, he made his way down to the muddy stream, which, at this time, was pitch black, and stepped into the water. This would be a sort of baptism. He descended into the water and dunked himself in it. It was too shallow to cover his entire body, so he splashed some water onto his head. Now he was ready for whatever this night held in store for him. As he ascended the side of the creek, he saw before him the well-trimmed grass soccer field, lit by down lights on the large steel poles surrounding it, and began to stagger in its direction. Soon, he was standing in the middle of the field, wet from the downpour. He felt alone. Not physically alone. There were cars going up and down the road next to the field. But as far as he knew, nobody knew he was out here. But strangely, he saw someone approaching in the light. It was a middle-aged man. Thunder boomed across the field. "What are you doing out here?" "Best to be truthful. I'm waiting for the world to end." "Have you come to join me?" Lightning lit up the sky. "Yes, I'm out here for the same reason." They both turned and looked at the houses, whose steel back fences met the side of the field. "Do you think we're the only ones who know?" The rain belted down on them both. "I think so." The thunder from the lightning rumbled heavy and hard as more great arcs lit up the sky. and the rain became heavier. The man looked at him through the gelatinous downpour. "How did you get here?" he replied in a frantic rush. "I've been walking through this night down many different paths. I honestly couldn't tell you how I got here. I just kept on walking. Eventually, I hit the creek over there, and then I came to this field. The wind battered them, causing the rain to hit them in an angular fashion, directly on their face." The man came up to him, soaking wet, and put a hand on his shoulder. "Tell me your name. We need to pass the time somehow." The rain began to subside, and the wind became calmer. He responded, "My name's Jack. Who are you anyway?" The man looked at the ground, his hand still on his shoulder. "I'm David. Tell me everything you know about why you're here. Tell me everything you know about the world ending." He sat down, and the man sat with him. "I left my car when the radio started sounding funny. Just got out and left it where it was. It wasn't just the radio. I felt like the car was going to lock me in any second. I walked and walked, and when I got to some shops, I heard people laughing at me, but I just ignored them and opened the Bible. I was sitting on a concrete barrier, and the pages just started to turn, slowly at first, but then faster and faster, till it stopped at the book of Revelation. Ah, the book of Revelation, the prophecy of the end times. But don't you think that maybe it was just the wind? Jack's face tightened, and his teeth gritted. "It was a sign. I know a sign when I see one." A loud thunder crack shook the earth. He began to pace back and forth, and then turned to face David, his voice trembling despite his efforts, words spilling out too fast, fingers twitching against the damp grass. "The end of the world is when God returns his Son, Jesus, back to the world to judge everyone. Everything great we have built, all the technology we have created, it won't make any difference. Everything will be destroyed to be remade again. All the wicked will be sent to hell, while those who believe will be given new bodies and will live forever with God, Jesus, in their midst." "I see," said David. "I'm not going to debate your beliefs with you. I respect your choice. But tell me, what made you think it's happening right now?" He began to pace again. "It started as a feeling. I was feeling so amped up. And then I saw the pages turn on my Bible. And then this crazy storm started happening. And I've had this horrible feeling, like 1,000 people are watching me at once. If I close my eyes, I can almost see them looking at me. And then, when I was in my car, I heard people singing my name. I don't know why they were doing that. Maybe they want me to think I'm special. So I'll think I am the Messiah, but I'd be a false Messiah, so I can't let them control me." David replied softly, "I can see there is a lot going on for you. Let's break this down. So, the storm made you feel more alert, more vigilant. The way you said it before, it was as if your feelings created the storm. But don't you think the storm might have been what, in your words, amped you up, and not the other way around? The wind became gentle. He continued, his voice calm and reassuring, and the feeling of being watched. This could be paranoia. Many people who become paranoid feel they are being watched. And when you heard people singing your name, are you sure that's what you heard? Do you think maybe you misheard? Or perhaps you're hallucinating? In any case, you left your car running in the middle of the road. I hope it hasn't been stolen. His shoulders slumped. The clouds were clearing, and a few stars were visible through the soccer field lights. Everything you're saying could be true, but if I can't trust my own feelings, how can I know anything? I'm a Christian. I believe God can talk to me. Is God deceiving me? Silence descended upon them, with only a faint breeze gusting back and forth. David smiled. Listen, I respect your beliefs, and I'm sure that there is something in those beliefs that allows for God to communicate with you in certain ways. But let me tell you something. He opened his wallet and pulled out a card. I am not actually here for the end of the world. I'm here to find you. I'm a psychologist in the public mental health care system. Your parents have reported you missing. And I'm here because your phone allowed us to track you. That might sound like a breach of privacy, but believe me, it's in your own interest. Right now, I believe you are mentally unwell, and I want to help you. Look at the both of us out here, soaked from head to toe. I need you to follow me over to my car so we can take you somewhere where we have medicine that can help calm you down. It's going to be hard at first. The medication isn't perfect, but if you keep taking it, you will get used to the side effects. And then things like this won't happen again. Hopefully. He looked down, wondering at everything he had just heard. How do I know you're telling the truth? How do I know you're going to take me somewhere and torture me? You know the world is filled with people who hate Christians. How do I know you're not a Satanist and part of a plan to make me lose my faith? Tears began to fall from his eyes. I believe that God can get me through anything. But honestly, I don't know if I could hold up under torture. The wind began to pick up again. David's face took on a look of empathy. All I can say is that I promise I'm here to help you. If God is going to communicate with you, it will help if you're thinking straight. And that's what we're going to try to do. Help you to be able to think without succumbing to delusions and paranoia. I've seen many cases like yours, and I really do feel for the people we treat. Will you come with me? He felt a sense of resignation. All right, I'll come with you. Though the ground was soaked, He could feel the firmness of the earth beneath his feet. The two of them walked off the field. The air was now completely still, and crickets could be heard chirping in the night air. The above story ends, but never stops. Here is another story that will not disappoint you. In Our Blood can expect heavy thunderstorms from 9 p.m. to 3 a.m. Chris's radio buzzed as he trundled down the exit to the rest stop. Windshield wipers working overtime as the rain and wind pelted his semi. He would have to wait out the storm, lest he risk ending up in a ditch. All the better for me, he thought to himself as he pulled up to the truck stop. I can finally look for someone to play with. Chris had been a trucker for years, enjoying the solitude of the road and the freedoms it granted him. Were he to succeed at his goals, he would need space and quiet. His roots offered him just that. Nobody had caught on to him yet, though the news was always warning potential victims away from hitchhiking. He was a legend along I-80, killing travelers and truckers alike. He climbed out of his truck, hurrying inside the rest stop as the rain poured. The place was completely dead. Chris sighed, cursing his bad luck. First the storm, and now nobody around to play with. He was going to have to keep moving, wasn't he? His fingers itched to grasp a life by the throat, to tear it apart piece by piece until there was nothing left but red. It had been too long since he had had free rein. He thought back to his last hunt. He had snuffed out a college kid whose car had broken down on the side of the road. Some freckle-faced loser whose name he didn't even remember. That kid had put up a good fight, but he was no match for Chris. None of them were. He grinned to himself. He would find someone to play with soon enough. The sound of the rest stop doors banging open startled him, and he turned to find two sopping wet figures shaking themselves dry in the entryway. They looked young and weak, Chris noted, with a wolfish grin. Perfect. What are you boys doing out here all alone? Chris called out, watching his prey with barely concealed bloodlust. The young men eyed him warily. One of them stepped forward, standing between Chris and his friend. It's not safe out there in the rain. Our car broke down, the young man said quietly, voice meek and small. We need a ride. Can you help us, mister? Chris couldn't believe his luck. Where are you two headed? Chicago. Chris grinned, extending a weathered hand for the boy to take. We'll head out when the rain has let up a bit then, he said, introducing himself. My name is Chris. What do I call you two? I'm Matthew, the boy who shook his hand said. And I'm Sam, the other said warily. They were perfect for Chris in every way, soft and unassuming. Well, Matthew, Sam, do you two need something to eat? I can get you something at the vending machines. No thanks. Matthew shook his head. He would be a difficult one, wouldn't he? We're okay. The trio sat in awkward silence for about a half an hour, waiting for the rain to let up. Chris fidgeted where he sat, watching the two young men, impatient. He supposed he didn't have to wait for the rain to let up completely. "Wanna head out?" he asked, standing. "I don't think waiting around here is gonna do us much good. The rain is supposed to continue almost all night." "All fine by me," Matthew sighed, helping Sam to his feet. "After you, mister." Chris led them through the pouring rain and towards his truck, helping them up into the cabin. Thunder boomed overhead, a sinister soundtrack for what was about to come. Chris got Matthew and Sam situated and then pulled out of the rest stop, heart soaring with anticipation. "So what's in Chicago?" Chris asked, looking over at Matthew. "Family? Friends? A new start," Matthew said quietly, expression tense. "I don't want to talk about it." "Perfect," Chris thought. "They're runaways." "Fair enough. I won't make you talk if you don't want to." "Where are you headed?" Sam asked. The first thing he had said the entire time he was in Chris's truck. "Are you going to Chicago too?" "Nah," Chris dismissed. "I'm headed for the East Coast. Raleigh." "Not anymore," Chris gasped as Matthew reached across the center console, wrestling the steering wheel out of his grip and sending them veering off the road. Chris swore as his trailer swung off of the road, rending metal screeching as sheets of rain cascaded down upon them. What the hell was this kid's problem? Rage built in Chris's chest as the semi came to a shuddering halt, firmly lodged in the drainage ditch. "You're ours now," Matthew hissed as he stuck Chris in the neck with something sharp and stinging. He could feel the fight leave his body as Matthew and Sam dragged him out of the truck and into the ditch. What were these kids? Chris struggled against his captors, but whatever they had drugged him with was making it hard to coordinate his limbs. He was so tired. "Sammy," Matthew hummed as he brushed Chris's rain-matted hair off of his forehead. "He can be yours. Happy birthday." Sam grinned wildly, the flicker of light against a blade catching Chris's eye as he lay paralyzed in the mud and grass. These kids were like him, he realized. He had fallen victim to his own game. He coughed weakly as Sam's knife ghosted across his skin, stinging icy cold. He was completely at the mercy of those he was sure would have been his victims. "You thought you could kill us," Matthew mused, gaze cold and calculating. Lightning split the sky with a resounding crack. "We're not scared of the likes of you. Now, we get to have our fun." The wind screamed in Chris's stead as his captors took him apart. Oh, the irony of it all. Here he was, reduced to a mere plaything in the heart of the storm. He never should have stopped at that rest stop. Only once his frantic heartbeat had fizzled out did the fear finally leave him. He stared unseeingly into the pouring rain as the sky mourned his loss. Matthew and Sam disappeared into the night, not a trace left behind. The Federal Bureau of Investigation has issued a warning to travelers along I-80. Chris's radio buzzed as the semi lay abandoned in the ditch. Serial killings along the highway threaten lone truckers. Do not stop for hitchhikers and report anything suspicious to local authorities. The Veilbloom. Elwyn absorbed the gentle coastal wind as it caressed her face from where she sat within the moors that lined her village. Stray wisps from her plaited, brown gold-streaked hair broke free as it was picked up by drafts. Distant sounds of the nearby market where she worked were a pressing reminder that she had stolen extra minutes to escape work duties. The red knitted hat protecting her ears played tug of war with the increasing gusts that rippled through the purple heather as she ran back towards the busy village, only looking down to ensure she did not step on any wildlife going about their day. Without warning, a darkness encroached the sky, and a slow, thick mist curled around the young woman's path. Elwyn became a static pillar of fear, watching the tendrils of mist reaching out and parting the heather, beckoning her to change her path, unable to sense beyond the darkness that strangled out the rest of the world. Elwyn tensely focused her vision on what the dark magic revealed. Something was glowing intensely. Elwyn tenderly progressed her nimble feet, feelings of fear and interest arguing with one another. She came upon a ruby-red thorned bush, isolating an intense, majestic amethyst glow beneath it. A faint whisper trickled into Elwyn's ears. The bramble peeled itself, exposing the velvet, petaled, regal-like flower bud, glistening with crystal dewdrops. "The tide obeys the moon," a female voice sang, prompting the rose to bloom fully before Elwyn's widened eyes. "But not all who guide you wish you to sail true." Before she could repeat the phrase in her head, the darkness sank away into the moors, leaving no trace of its sudden presence. The purple rose remained in Elwyn's hand for only a second before she carefully stuffed it into her pocket as voices came booming from the village, indicating that she had indeed been away too long. Looking and finding no traces of the encounter, she fled for the market. As Elwyn approached her father's stall, she could hear murmurations from the fellow tradesmen. Shouting orders came from customers who bartered prices on fabrics and fresh fish. "Did you see the weather change?" Elwyn hastily asked as she removed her hat and jacket, messily placing them onto the upturned veg crates in front of the stall. "Never mind the damn weather. Get peeling these damn carrots for supper." He tossed a knife to Elwyn and kicked an empty bucket next towards her feet. He was only strict from the grief of losing his love and their newborn daughter in childbirth in recent years. Frustrated, Elwyn perched herself on a stool and began carving at a carrot stump. Even if she told her father, he wouldn't believe her. The rugged orange skin tumbled into the bucket between her feet as her eyes fixed with intrigue on the powerful purple rose that seemed to glisten from the adjacent pocket. "It's a Veilbloom, if you were wondering," came a voice full of wisdom and assurance from the front of the tent. Elwyn glanced up to see a tall, thin, yet toned male figure bent over, perusing at the cabbages. His eyes pined towards the purple Veilbloom peeping out of the brown jacket pocket. The flower's quiet, luxurious vibrance seemed out of place and would surely be noticed by a knowing collector's eye. Elwyn glanced quickly towards her father, hoping she would not be heard. But he remained engrossed in organizing the stock in the back of the tent. "What do you know of them?" Elwyn stopped peeling and fixed a softened stare at the male. Her wide eyes probably revealed too much as she hoped for answers. Had she been cursed? She submissively looked toward the flower, phantom feeling its hard thorns against her fingers. "Only what the legend states," Vaska answered. "It's like finding a four-leaf clover. Just lucky." He picked up a cabbage and placed it under his arm. "My name is Vask. My family own a stall on the outskirts of the village. In my spare time, I am not ashamed to say that I am an anthophile." Vaska took out a small pocket-sized leather sketchbook. He opened it to reveal small flowers pressed neatly between the pages, each one secured with a small bit of clear tape. Elwyn tentatively leered over to see sprigs of lavender and small bouquets of daisies married together. Between parchment, she returned her eyes to Vaska. His emerald eyes cut sharp against the copper curls that framed his softened jawline. "I am only interested in where you found it, to satisfy the curiosity of a collector." His eyes flashed to meet hers. "I found it in the moors," was all Elwyn offered, indicating that if Vaska was to hold the cabbage in the crook of his arm any longer, he was to pay for it. Embarrassed, he hastily put his hand in his pocket to search for payment. Bringing out 2 silver coins, he placed them on the wooden trade table that bore the produce. "Thank you," Vask smiled as he grabbed 2 more cabbages. "Keep the change, and if you are into books, come by the stall tomorrow." He kept Elwyn's stare as he retreated into the market crowd. "Oi!" shouted Elwyn's father. "Are we getting supper tonight, or do I have to finally skin the cat?" Her father was stood holding up the rear tent flap, peering in with disappointment. Startled, Elwyn kicked the bucket back between her well-worn leather boots and continued to scalp the skin from the carrot, stealing glances at the Veilbloom in wonder of its true intentions. The next day, Elwyn laid out the vegetables onto the wooden trade table as her father stacked the emptied crates from behind the tent. After a night of being plagued by the whispers and visions of dark forests, she desired to know more about the Veilbloom. The blood-red thorns pressed into the inner lining of her coat pocket, the tips seeping through to the cotton of her work dress, nipping at her as she moved. Glancing down, she could see the rich velvet petals longingly looking back up at her from within, deep in her coat pocket. She rubbed her thumb over the Veilbloom's soft middle. The tightly gathered corolla gently ticked the pad of her thumb. "I'm just going to get a new recipe book," Elwyn called to her father. Before he could battle her decision, she broke out into a purposeful stride. Her jacket rippled against the cool air as her arms straightened through the sleeves. She pulled her collar to secure herself against the chill, weaving in and out of tradesmen setting up their stalls, unsure of the faces that surrounded her in a familiar satay of work. She kept her head low, turning on her heels and accepting defeat, trying to find Vaska. Elwyn began to walk back to the southern area of the coastal market. Smells of fresh fish and spices began to fill her nostrils, reminding her stomach of its emptiness. "I found it," called a familiar voice. Vaska appeared in her eye line as she paused to see him run back into his tent and return with a large, tatted book. Veilbloom. Vaska turned the book towards Elwyn as her hands held the edges to support its weight with him. Located in lands of enchantment, it amplifies one's desires and strength, even with madness. Vaska laughed gently as he impersonated a person riddled with madness and unbalance. Elwyn rejected the book by letting go of the worn-down leather edging and taking a step back from Vaska. "It also says it sings lullabies, which probably explains the bit about going mad." Vaska coyly laughed. Elwyn's face turned to deep thought at the young man, voluntarily helping her. "I don't desire anything." She paused, wondering if giving him the whole story would favor her or not. "What does it say about lullabies?" Her voice almost a whisper. The emerald in Vaska's eyes began to swirl with intrigue as he gestured for them to go somewhere quieter to talk. "Turn." The pair sat cross-legged underneath a large oak tree situated on the outskirts of the market. Elwyn's face buried in the book of hidden blooms. Each page, so thin almost translucent, gently flapped between her fingertips. It says in the legend that if the flower starts to glow, you become more powerful. Vaska added, as he looked deeply into at the island of dense forest on the horizon, isolated by small ocean waters. The enchanted, banished lands leaked darkness. His soft curls caught the wind, his eyes in a thoughtful trance. Elwyn shuddered at the thought of the flower's magic ending up in the wrong hands. "I should get back," Elwyn decided as she stood up, ready to face the wrath from her father upon her return. Elwyn woke suddenly, in the dead of night. Sweat dripped from her brow, her long brown damp hair that clung to her neck. "Help us," came a faint whisper. Elwyn held her breath as she looked around for the voice's owner, the Veilbloom, picking it up by its thick green stem. The ruby-red thorns pulsated as she brought it closer to her ear. "Help us, Elwyn." It eerily beckoned, suddenly, moving images as if they were her own memories, flooded her mind. She could see a vast forest that crawled with amethyst-colored smoke. A fawn emerged in the clearing, eyes wide with terror, trembling as it proceeded to lie down on the dark moss floor. Elwyn had feelings of blood rushing back to her limbs as she regained consciousness. Her mind lingered with a defiant message. The banished lands needed her help. Her head swiveled around to the oak tree beyond the market border, to see an elbow bent from behind it, as if someone was sat down with their back to it reading. Elwyn gingerly walked over to them, hoping the white cotton shirt belonged to Vaska, and not someone who would alert her father or challenge her in any way. Reassuringly, Vask sat with the heads of bluebells crowded on the bend of his knee as he pressed them into his sketchbook. He looked up to see a panic-stricken Elwyn. "What's the matter?" His face matched her concerned look. "The Veilbloom showed me something," Elwyn bleated softly under her breath. "I don't know the meaning of the vision or the dream," Vasquez started, after hearing the story from Elwyn. He stared again at the island of trees isolated by small ocean waters, wondering if the legend is true of the banished lands. "If we go there, do you think we will die?" Elwyn asked with hope of a good answer. Vaska didn't respond. He continued his longing stare towards the banished lands. "I just know that this dream felt more real than any other I have had," Elwyn continued. "The fawn seemed terrified, not of me, but of something I don't think I could see. I think we should try to help it." Elwyn removed the Veilbloom from her pocket. Its petals had begun to wilt at the edges, curling in as if it were ready to die. "What I have done?" Elwyn softly asked herself under her breath. Had she stayed in the market that day, she wouldn't be having nightmares caused by florals. "I don't think it's something that you have done," Vaska replied, as his eyes glinted with what seemed like excitement. "I think it's more about what you could do to help." Once they beached their stolen rowing boat amongst the cold brown sand on the shore of the banished lands. The atmosphere hung heavy as life drew to a whisper, and then to a flat silence. "What does your love of flowers tell you now?" Elwyn asked Vaska, with a tint of amusement at the moss-strangled rocks that decorated the forest floor. Not even the twigs beneath their feet made a noise as they progressed deeper into the darkness. "Nothing yet," Vaska gently replied, as they descended deeper into the towering forest. Elwyn tripped on a rock, twisting her ankle slightly. "Careful," Vask panted, as he grasped a hold of her elbow, prompting a powerful vision into Elwyn's mind, causing her to spiral in between memories, not her own. A hushed murmur echoed in her ears as she saw sights of a large wolf with emerald eyes stalking and hunting on the outskirts of the forest. As if unable to enter beyond the first row of trees, many moons passed in the sky as it returned night after night. A clear voice embedded deep in Elwyn's veins. The tide obeys the moon, but not all who guide you wish you to sail true. The vision of the wolf disappeared into smoke, shifting into flurries of flashbacks. The first time she met the Veilbloom flower, the look in Vask's eyes, as he also saw it for the first time that day in the market. As if he pined for it, she remembered. The book thrust into her face that day in the market, as if Vaska knew she would come looking for answers. The Veilbloom let out a breath, glowing intensely in agreement. Elwyn had not realized she was now holding it, squeezing it in her paper-thin hand, seething from an anger rooted deep within. He had led her there, purposefully, knowingly. "Help us," came the wispy echo. It repeated with each turn, louder than the last. More voices adding into the chorus of pleas from wildlife. Elwyn fell to the floor as the visions and voices ripped away from her, breathless and her mind aching. She looked up to see Vask's face of worry. "What did you see?" he hastily asked, his face tense with pressure. Everything," Elwyn tried to continue when a creature in the clearing approached. A fawn. An amethyst smoke seeped in from behind the fawn, encasing everything in its wake in a building chaos. Turning to face the fawn properly, Elwyn could see the thick smoke tendrils once again clearing a path. This time around the fawn, who was whimpering, but showing a quiet strength, trying to stand. Elwyn had seconds to think. She turned to Vask. His emerald eyes were gleaming with anticipation at the flower as he turned toward her. "It's working," came Vaska's voice, a rasp with a hint of excitement at the Veilbloom glowing intensely. He snatched it from her fingers, contorting his body in obsession and glee. He threw his arms in the air. "I am the most powerful!" But only silence sounded over the whirring mists. Elwyn felt a burning in her veins. Her body acted automatically as she turned to face Vaska, her back to the trembling fawn in protection. The Veilbloom turned to ash in Vaska's trembling hand, his face mad. Auburn curls bounced around with every frantic move he made, searching for the bloom. He turned to see Elwyn, her arm outstretched in retaliation towards him. A push at his shoulder from an invisible force turned his face from confused to pure rage at seeing the Veilbloom reforming itself in the powerful young woman's pocket, siding with her instead. "Clever girl, but I don't need you," Vaska hissed. "Just the Veilbloom now that your kind heart woke it from slumber." His teeth began to form into sharp fangs. His face shifted into a recognizable wolf with emerald eyes. He lunged for Elwyn, jaws agape in blind fury and jealousy. Elwyn darted to the side. A fire of purple light erupted through her veins, streaming out from her fingertips into the wolf's beastly body, knocking him backwards. He steadied himself and leaped high into the air to plant another attack, aiming true to Elwyn and the glowing Veilbloom. At once, she coaxed the power from the Veilbloom, causing the ground to quake against the sheer force. Gripping against the weight of the power, she lifted and hurled a fatal blow towards the wolf, smashing his limp body against the strongest and tallest trees. Elwyn panted as she looked at the purple illuminations in her veins trickle out and into the fawn behind her. She looked up at the wolf, but only to see his body disintegrate into smoke and disappear into the sky. An escaped curse. Elwyn ran to the fawn, hoping to help it to live, to answer its plea. The soft curve of the fawn's head cupped Elwyn's hand, opening its eyes tenderly. The land around awoke in harmony. The fawn gathered to its feet, bowing proudly to Elwyn, as the gentle black nose touched the floor. A sweep of purple brushed through the land. A once cursed land started to return to life as animals crept out of deep burrows and birds took once again to the sky. The fawn transformed into a majestic stag, concluding the awakening of the misunderstood lands. His aura glowed in the same pearlescent magic that once flowed through Elwyn's veins. She looked down to see her bare arms, and back to the stag, who nodded at her before bouncing off into the thriving atmosphere. Smiling, Elwyn knew her calling now was back to her grieving father. She could never leave him on his own. A thorn dug into her side. The Veilbloom remained in her pocket, clasped tightly in a sleeping bud. Its messages sang deep in Elwyn's head as she stroked its velvety casing. It was the flower's magic that gave her the power to connect and calm the land. But it was her kind heart that ultimately saved them all. So today's story has come to an end. Or perhaps it never really ended. There are mysteries still there, questions still unanswered, and sometimes things that seem to only exist in stories can creep into reality in unexpected ways. Are you sure that when you turn off the sound, everything around you will still be normal as before? Or is there something watching you? Either way, always remember that these are just stories, or at least we want to believe that they are. If you like moments of suspense, tension, and breathlessness, don't forget to follow me so you don't miss the next stories. And next time, when you come back, make sure you are ready, because what awaits you may be even scarier than you thought. See you again if you still have the courage to continue listening.